Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, South Africa forces an emergency UN session to slam the US's military's toppling of Venezuela's leader, Nicolas Maduro. At home, President Ramaphosa echoes the condemnation. Also, Somalia is furious over the Israeli foreign minister's visit to Somaliland. Mogadishu slams it as a violation of its territorial integrity. The African Union also demands Israel revoke its recent recognition of the breakaway republic as being separate to Somalia. And the Desert Foxes are through to the quarter-finals, but the Leopards will now have to lie low. After Algeria's victory over DRC in Morocco, the Congolese squad's appearance has still left its mark, and not least in the form of its most unique supporter, a living statue who's offered his stoic support all the way to his Congolese squad. But first, South Africa's president called for the US to immediately release Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. The couple were captured in a military strike on Caracas at the end of December, and President Cyril Ramaphosa's ANC party has described that act as American imperialist aggression. Ramaphosa's criticism echoes condemnation that Pretoria voiced at the UN headquarters in New York on Monday after demanding that the UN Security Council hold an emergency session. Uganda and Eritrea also spoke out there against Washington's actions in Venezuela. To unpick all of this, I'm joined now by Eunice Masson, who's in Cape Town for us. Now, Eunice, first of all, let's get into the details. What's South Africa saying about Washington's toppling of Maduro?
Sure. So South Africa's acting deputy representative to the UN, Jonathan Passmore, argued that the US violated Venezuela's sovereignty and their independence as a nation. He also called the US out for violating Article 2 of the UN Charter. And this, in a nutshell, calls for a global cooperation or peace and equality among all nations. He also asked that decisive action should be taken against such violations. And he also actually called out that failure to do so might create even a precedent where military force can be used as a form of discourse in international politics. That was our South Africa's UN representative, Jonathan Passmore, to the Security Council.
So Pretoria's relationship with Washington has become notoriously rocky over the last year or so. Do you reckon that this defense of Venezuela is more about supporting Caracas or confronting the United States?
It's like you've mentioned that South Africa and the US relations are at an all-time low. Under the Trump administration, South Africa has seen tariff hikes. Our former ambassador to the US was expelled. We have also been excluded from G20 talks. However, South Africa's stance against the US at the UN Security Council runs much deeper and goes far back than the most recent diplomatic differences. South Africa, and they are together with 121 other nations, including Uganda, is part of what they call the non-aligned movement. Now, these countries call for global peace and do not take sides when it comes to matters, let's say, such as the Ukraine war. For example, the countries would rather call for mediation and negotiation. So when South Africa does take a side like they have against the US in this particular matter, it wants to reiterate that its call for the UN to be reformed in that it represents all member states, especially Africa. South Africa has for many years called for a permanent African member state to the UN Security Council. And it wants Africa to not only be a subject, but rather an active participant. So to call for action against one of the major member states, the US in this case, South Africa might hope that the UN Security Council could be reformed.
And how's all this going down at home? Not everyone in South Africa's unity government appears to be pleased with Ramaphosa's take. Why is it proving to be so divisive?
Yeah, I would say the majority of parties such as the Progressive EFF, Action SA, and the MK Party have condemned the US military action in Venezuela. It is the largest opposition party, the DA, who is accusing the ANC of hypocrisy because of the ANC that decided now to take a clear stance against the US. The DA is pointing out that it failed to speak out against Russia when it invaded Ukraine. But again, South Africa has for many years tried to reform the UN Security Council, and this is a good opportunity to strengthen its voice for a just representation on the council.
Thank you so much, Eunice Masham, there for us in Cape Town. Now, 10 days after formally recognising Somaliland, and Israel has sent its foreign minister to visit the self-declared republic. Now, this is a highly contested move. Somaliland operates independently to Somalia, but is still technically part of its territory. The African Union held an emergency meeting about the cozying up between Somaliland and Israel on Tuesday and said that it still condemns the recognition in the strongest possible terms. Somalia itself says that Gideon Saar's visit amounts to unacceptable interference in its internal affairs. Analysts say that Somaliland could provide Israel with better access to the Red Sea, and at their meeting in Hargeisa on Tuesday, both Saar and President Abdirahman Mohamed Abdullah seemed keen on the potential of their relationship.
Your presence here today demonstrates leadership, confidence in the future of our relations. It sends a strong message that Somaliland and Israel are ready to deepen engagement and move decisively toward the establishment of diplomatic infrastructure.
We agreed on the mutual appointment of ambassadors and the opening of embassies. We will get that done soon. We agreed to work together to promote relations between our countries for the sake of mutual prosperity. We want to build an enduring and warm friendship, not only between governments, also between the people of Somaliland and the people of Israel.
Well, supporters of Central African Republic's president have been celebrating his apparent re-election. Faustin Archange Touadéra looks to have won a third term in office following the December 28th polls. Take a look.
According to provisional results, Faustin Archange Touadéra has been re-elected president of the Central African Republic for a third term, strengthening his grip on power.
I would like to thank the people of the Central African Republic who have shown their maturity, commitment and determination for democracy and for democratic consolidation.
A professor of mathematics who later became vice-chancellor of the country's biggest university, Touadéra served as prime minister for 5 years under President François Bozizé. He was elected to office in 2016 and won re-election 4 years later in a poll that was marred by accusations of fraud. A new constitution that passed in a referendum in 2023 opened the way to a third term.
I think that the new constitution we're going to introduce will help our country, the Central African Republic, to develop. That's why I'm asking you all, when the time is right, to do as we say. Vote so we can move the country forward.
Touadéra pointed to his achievements such as security and improved infrastructure. A peace deal signed in 2019 brought an end to 13 years of civil war, but was controversial for inviting warlords into government in exchange for disarming. Touadéra initially enjoyed the support of the international community, but his critics have called him President Wagner for his reliance on the Russian mercenary group, which provided him with bodyguards. And his latest election, which he looks to have won in a landslide, has been shrouded in controversy. Touadéra's defeated rival Anissé Georges Dologolé said the polls were fraudulent and claimed he was the winner, an accusation dismissed by the president.
And now to AFCON. A dramatic extra-time goal clinched Algeria's win over DRC in their last 16 match on Tuesday. The euphoria over the Desert Foxes quarterfinals appointment even sent some onlookers into such exuberant celebrations that one journalist reportedly broke a TV screen after jumping up and down on a table in joy. Understandable, I say. Anyway, our Selena Sykes talks us through the match.
Fans were on the edge of their seats until the very last moment as Algeria beat DR Congo 1-0 in extra time to book their spot in the quarter-finals thanks to a spectacular last-minute shot in the 190th minute from Adil Abou Bina. It had been a cagey, tightly contested encounter with not much separating the two sides over 90 minutes, finishing goalless and going into extra time. Algeria did have more possession and more shots, but struggled to find that killer finish. And the tension continued in extra time as it looked like it was heading to penalties until that spectacular curling shot from Abou Bina, with the assists coming from Ramiz Zerouki, two super subs that came on just minutes earlier in the game to make all the difference for Algeria, who now progress to the quarter-finals. They have a tough task ahead of them next. They'll be facing Nigeria, who have the best attack in the competition so far, with 12 goals scored by the Super Eagles, including that statement, a 4-0 thrashing of Mozambique in their last 16 encounter.
Thanks to Selina for keeping an eye on that for us. Well, in contrast to that supporter I mentioned earlier who couldn't sit still in his backing of Algeria, one of the Congolese Leopards' biggest fans has offered up his stoic commitment to their efforts. Michel Kuka Mboladinga will always be remembered as the living statue that energized his team. Take a look.
He doesn't chant, he doesn't jump, he doesn't wave a flag. And yet his image has become one of the most unforgettable of his Africa Cup of Nations. Across Africa and around the world, fans have embraced a different kind of hero, not from the pitch, but from the stands. Meet Michel Boladinga, known simply as Lumumba. At every match of the DRC, Michel stood like a statue. His performance is more than fandom. It's a tribute to Patrice Lumumba, the first prime minister of an independent Congo, a leader assassinated in 1961. Michel Kuka Boladinga has become an iconic figure among the fans.
I don't know where the inspiration came from, but he really does look like Lumumba. And when he joined the football club, there were also people who motivated him and pushed him on.
Lumumba is our hero. It is thanks to him that the DRC became independent. It is thanks to Lumumba.
For 90 minutes, sometimes more, one man became a symbol of courage, remembrance, and identity.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.